Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing incredibly well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for a lovely story this evening. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. Brooke Bordeaux had really enjoyed her day at the fair with her two best friends from her childhood, Fern and Anthea, who had persuaded her to come and join them on this fun day out. Brooke hadn't been to a fair in years, and was quite certain she was far too grown up to enjoy the childlike whimsical things that she had once loved as a little girl. But she was pleasantly surprised to find that going back in time and reliving childlike memories from the past was much more fun than she'd ever anticipated it would be. Indeed, for her, being at the fairground was rather like a flashback to a more innocent time in her life, so getting involved in all these childlike indulgences had been an absolute scream for her. She couldn't remember a time when she'd laughed as much as this, so much so that her belly actually ached, which is the kind of laughter that is reputed to having enormous health benefits. The three young women had ambitiously participated in everything that the fair had to offer. They'd enjoyed riding the carousel, guessing how many beans were in a glass jar, throwing sponges at each other's faces, when one of the three of them would stand behind the stand, placing their head through the open hole, which had been made to look like an old man. Probably because it made throwing the sponge at an old man seem very inappropriate, which made the game a whole lot more fun. Brooke's aims had been startlingly accurate, so much so that both her friends had been covered unapologetically with the horrifying impact of a very wet sponge thrown directly in their faces, which had ensured all three women were left in stitches. But unfortunately Brooke's two best friends were unable to return the favour and give Brooke a very good thump in the face in return with a wet sponge, for their ungainly, rather pathetic aims had been pitiful to say the very least. It got a whole lot worse with the pie-throwing stand, where they'd thrown pies into each other's faces, and had gone off to the ladies to clean up, for their clothes had been soaked with pie, and there wasn't an area on their faces that wasn't covered with the mucky goo. But this made them laugh all the more, for chasing each other around with pies had been absolutely hilarious. The three had enjoyed using those cardboard cut-out fish magnets to hopefully pull out a prize for themselves in a make-believe steel fish pond. But all three young women's attempt to fish for anything was futile to say the least, and had been lousy and unproductive, for they had ended up with no prizes at all, which was exceedingly frustrating, especially after seeing the smug lady before them, walking off rather self-satisfied, with a teddy bear that was almost bigger than she was. It didn't help that she was wearing a huge, conceited grin on her face, and looked at the three women rather pompously, as if she instinctively knew that they wouldn't be receiving any prizes that day, which made them all the more determined to try and try again, until their wallets were running empty. Irrespective of all their losses, it did little to deter the fun they were having at the fair that day. There were so many people everywhere, walking around the place, all with big smiles on their face. The prime objective of the fair was to raise some much-needed money for cancer research. Some women appeared to be wearing pink T-shirts for breast cancer awareness, and there was a large van parked at the corner of the fair where women could go for a quick screening. But Fern, Anthea and Brooke avoided that van like the plague, as it would have put a marked damper on their day, as no one wants to think about cancer on a fun day out like this. It was a bustle of lively activity. Little children were happily screaming in delight as they enjoyed all the rides on offer, of which there were too many to choose from. There were kids carrying Mickey Mouse balloons, and some had their faces painted in makeup to resemble a lion, a tiger, or even a bird. And Brooke remembered when she was a kid how, after returning home from having her face made up into a cat, her mother had to chase her around the house to catch her, as Brick did not want that makeup to be removed, for she had fancied looking like a cat forever. But sadly reality had punched her cruelly in the face when her mother had wiped her face clean and told her she looked so much better without all that muck on her. to be a cat," she had cried out indignantly, looking at her clean face with such bitter disappointment. Her mother had told her to stop being so ridiculous, because she wouldn't look very good if she went around looking like a cat all the time. But Brooke had disagreed with her on this. Brooke and her two best friends had eaten candy floss in a cloud of glorious colours, and gluttonously gobbled their way through sticky toffee apples and caramel popcorn that had done their teeth no favours. Brooke's teeth were now aching from all that chomping, and she had a horrible unsettling feeling in her gut that she might just have developed a cavity in one of her teeth. But then again, who cared about things like that when they were having an absolute blast from the past? Indeed, it didn't get better than this. It would seem all three young women had lost themselves in the day, forgetting that they were in their early 20s, for they had become kids again, almost as if they had been teleported on a magic carpet back to 20 years ago, returning and arriving at the destination of their childhoods. Brooke couldn't help thinking to herself how when she was a child she had longed to be all grown up like her mother, and yet the childhood years of her life had been so fleeting and among the best. So why would anyone in their right minds ever wish their childhoods away? It was at the fair that all three young women forgot their responsibilities. They became one with the moment, not thinking of the past nor of the future, which is exactly how children tend to approach life. And there is a lot to learn from such people, who know how to live in the moment, a second at a time. So to become a kid for a day was utterly wonderful. Brooke realized that even though she'd grown up, that there was still a big child within her that desperately wanted to come out and play and have a good time, and really appreciated letting go of adult responsibilities for a change, which was extremely liberating for her. Laughter gaily spilled out in the air that afternoon. Joyful voices impregnated the atmosphere with an upbeat, excitable energy that was contagiously infectious, for there was not a glum, sad face to be seen anywhere. And even the people running the stands, from the trombola to the man organising the pony rides, seemed to be enjoying themselves profusely. The order of the day was to have a great time. Brooke had only stumbled across one grumpy elderly man, complaining tirelessly about a gammy leg that was giving him a whole lot of pain. He kept saying, "Why did we come here? My leg is killing me. I want to get back home. I wish I hadn't come to the fair. Why did we come out?" But the three women ran into him half an hour later, and the man's dispirited face appeared almost childlike and enthusiastic, as if he had miraculously lost over 60 years of his life and had been transported back to his childhood again. And the smile on his face was so wide it barely fit on him. It would seem, out on the fair this morning, even the most miserable of people were being completely transformed, as if their childhoods had come bouncing back in a flash of lightning, it would seem. "I can't remember the last time I had so much fun," Brooke conceded to both of her friends. "I'm just like that grumpy old man we ran into. I thought I'd have a miserable time here, but I genuinely can't recall a time when I've laughed so much. I've been in stitches all morning. I wanted to kill you, Fern, I really did, for throwing that custard pie square in my face. It was dribbling down my cheeks and saturating my clothes and was sticking to me. But in the end it was so hilarious to be covered in muck like that. But the most satisfying feeling of all, of course, was to get my revenge on you, which I did, very well I might add, throwing a pie straight back at you. I feel like a kid again, and it's so great. It's so carefree, so relaxed and chilled to feel like this. These days I get so uptight, so tense. But this afternoon, it's almost as if a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I would certainly recommend any adult come to the fair like this. They'd never regret it. I wish I could push my mum to come here. My mum is 1,000 times worse than I am. You know what she's like. She's pent up about everything. She could do with coming to the fair. But she thinks it's just pathetic to come to the fair at our age. But it's not. It's a wonderful thing to do. Fern gave her a cheeky nudge and giggled. "Didn't I tell you this is exactly what we all needed? A chance to pretend we're children again. I'm not going to lie. I adored throwing that custard pie directly in your face, Brooke. You're right. These days you are uptight. You needed some loosening up. You should have seen your reaction, though. You were mortified when the pie I threw at you hit your face. You got mad at me. You began to chase me with the pie. We both ended up rolling on the ground. We were cramped up with laughter. If the truth be told, I haven't laughed this much in an age. It does feel like old times, doesn't it? I mean, we used to do these kind of things together as children, and now all we do is sit down in a bar and enjoy a glass of wine together. How boring is that? Brooke nodded. You're right, it does get boring sometimes, the things that adults do. Drinking a glass of wine is overrated, let me tell you. Being here reminds me of the time I threw that squidgy cake at you in 3rd grade. We chased each other around the schoolyard, throwing anything we could find at each other, sandwiches and drink, you name it. I wouldn't have missed this for the world, even though that custard pie really did rile me up a bit. But that's the whole idea, Brooke, to rile each other up. It stirs up that childlike passion that so often gets suppressed when we grow up. Brooke was a 1st grade teacher who taught children to read and write. Even though she surrounded herself with that childlike innocence of young children from Monday to Fridays, she could be rigidly stiff and extremely set in her ways. She had an unfortunate propensity to take life far too seriously, much like her parents did. Maybe it ran in the Bordeaux genes, to always look at life so very seriously, almost as if it was an exam you needed to study for, and getting less than A++ wasn't even a consideration. It was like Brooke wore the weight of the world on her shoulders every single day of her life, but a trip to the fair had revealed to her very candidly that sometimes it's really good to let your hair down for a change and go with the flow, and being able to laugh like this was medicine for the soul. Brooke's father was one of those very, very stern individuals who could listen to a comedy on television and fail to find anything remotely amusing. He was the kind of pessimistic individual that always looked utterly miserable and believed that life was one big laborious challenge after another, and his bleak, rather morbid outlook on things certainly rubbed off on Brooke, who growing up had wanted to be nothing like her father, but had realized in recent years to her horror that she'd become exactly like him, but the female version of him, so to speak. Even to look at, they appeared uncannily similar, with the same colour brown hair, which was pretty drab, but they both had natural chestnut highlights and hazel-coloured eyes. Brooke's mother kept telling her daughter that she was exactly like her father, and that bugged her greatly, because she knew she'd inherited his very sombre boot face, which was not something Brooke wanted to hear. But when she examined herself in the mirror, she could see her father staring straight back at her, and indeed, when she smiled, her lips seemed to go downwards in exactly the same way as her father's did. It meant that Brooke always looked miserable, even when she was happy, which was a rather unfortunate trait to inherit from her father, as it would seem even when she was having a great time, it never really showed on her face. She hated this about herself, as so often growing up people would say to her, "Cheer up, Brooke, it might never happen," and their stinging words weren't exactly encouraging, because she could do nothing to change her appearance, apart from engaging in some serious cosmetic procedure, which was something she'd never be inclined to do. And who had heard of a surgeon turning your lip upwards so that you smile differently? So Brooke was resigned to the fact that there were some things she'd never be able to change about herself. To be fair, Brooke's mother, Samantha, was not much better by any manner of means, when it came to being instinctively miserable by nature. If she thought Brooke and her husband Jonas both possessed a rather unfortunate boot face, she should have taken a long, hard look at her reflection in the mirror, because she wasn't exactly a ray of sunshine herself. Her troubled, disquieted dark eyes were a tad fearful, and her uneasy lips, although they didn't drag downwards into a scowl like her daughter's and husband's did, were almost always nervously pinched together, as if she believed she was living her precarious life on the edge of a cliff and might just fall over any minute. Brooke's mother was extremely paranoid and overly suspicious. She was always advising Brooke to be extremely careful, as accidents could easily happen, especially if you crossed the road without paying attention, or rushed down the stairs of the wraparound porch in winter when they were iced up, for you might be disposed to having a nasty fall or break a wrist or an ankle. When Brooke had fallen ill, her mother would believe Brooke had pneumonia and was about to pop her clogs in any minute, when all she'd had was a mild case of flu. And even when the doctors reassured her that Brooke would live to fight another day, Samantha Bordeaux was not entirely convinced her daughter would ever make a full recovery. She was the kind of keyed-up, overwrought woman that would read the medical encyclopedia from back to front and over-embellish everything, insisting that any mild symptoms that anyone in the Bordeaux family had were a deadly strain of cancer or some other far-fetched disease. Brooke's contrived mother seemed to be terrified of accidents, and as a consequence she would drive her Volkswagen Golf at an extremely low speed, and was always getting angry drivers giving her the finger. She was so vigilantly cautious with whatever she did, always heedfully carrying mace on her person to protect herself from dangerous threats that she was sure lurked around the very next corner. Samantha Bordeaux circumspectly believed you could never be careful enough, and if you weren't paying attention, that is exactly when disaster would invariably strike. Brooke would tease her mother mercilessly about her paranoia and say, "Ma'am, if you were a mouse, even the trappers that came along to set up traps would never fool you. You'd be too wary to go anywhere near that cheese, because you'd smell a rat," she joked. "Well, it doesn't do any harm to be mindfully cautious," said Mrs. Bordeaux. "And you're right about the mouse trap. I would be a very salient mouse. They'd never catch me, those trappers, because I'd be far too clever for them, and I'd live a long life as a consequence. A fool rushes into things without paying due attention. I mean, look at those maniac drivers who drive through the red lights to get ahead on the road. You wonder what is going on in their heads, why they have no common sense, why they appear to be so dreadfully ignorant. Some of these people, oh, God bless their souls, never reach their destinations, do they? Because of their over-ambitiousness to get to their destination in the first place. And what happens? They end up pushing the daisies, just because they wanted to get somewhere a little faster." Brooke still lived at her parents' house, which of course was a tad embarrassing for a woman approaching her mid-20s, but her pitiful teacher's salary didn't exactly pay out very much. She was glad that many young people were in her rather awkward position, who also lived with their parents, so she didn't feel an absolute failure in that regard, that she wasn't living independently, although she very much wished she was. Ostensibly affording a house with the rising cost of living was completely out of the question for her. Brooke knew her parents liked her living with them, for the Bordeaux could keep a beady eye on their daughter's comings and goings, for the couple intrinsically believed the world was not a safe place to live in any more. So watching over their daughter gave them a measure of reassurance. The Bordeaux seemed to enjoy living under a dark cloud, almost as if they were expecting lightning to strike at any given moment, as Mrs. Bordeaux couldn't help flapping around the place like an agitated pigeon, for it seemed to Samantha Bordeaux that it was in her DNA to worry about absolutely everything. Brooke had always longed to be a first-grade teacher. It was all she ever wanted to do, and so she loved her job at the elementary school. But teaching youngsters to read and write was not an easy endeavour by any manner of means, and sometimes she'd have sleepless nights about those kids that were struggling to learn, because it was very important to Brooke to be the best teacher she could possibly be in the circumstances. Of course, going out to the fair today had actually not gone down well with her cynical parents, who seemed to think that going to the fair was not something a grown-up person should be doing. "Good Lord, Brooke, you do surprise me. You're making a day out of this, are you? Going to the fair
fair at your age. I might remind you, you're in your 20s. You're far too old for such a juvenile thing to do. If you were taking children in the first grade to the fair, supervising them, I could understand that. That's why parents go to the fair, to be with their children. But going to the fair with your 2 adult friends when you're in your 20s does seem rather juvenile, if you ask me.
Nobody's asking you anything, Mum, and I'd thank you to keep your opinion to yourself. If you must know, the fair is being held to raise money for cancer research. A lot of adults go to the fair. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's great to support the fair. Fern and Anthea persuaded me to go along with them. And believe it or not, it actually might be fun.
I very much doubt that, dear. It's a very childish thing to do if you want my opinion on the matter.
Well, I don't, Mum. Mrs. Bordeaux sceptically raised her manicured brow in a disapproving expression.
If you had a child of your own, Brooke, it would be a different story altogether. I remember on numerous occasions taking you to the fair when you were a child. I never enjoyed the experience myself, but that's what you do when you're a mother. You would always return home with sticky fingers, toffee apple stains around your mouth, and a blue tongue from all the blueberry ice cream you ingested. And you would always insist every single time that we went near those face painters to have your face painted into a cat. And you'd refuse to let me remove the makeup from your face. I'd have to hunt you down to get it off. You would make one hell of a fuss, let me tell you.
But I loved having my face painted up into a cat, and you were so cruel the way you made me take it off the moment I got home. You should have let me enjoy being a cat for a bit longer.
I don't think that would have been a good idea, Brooke. Imagine how much damage it would have done to your skin. But as far as I'm concerned, you're a grown woman. Taking a ride on a carousel and chomping through clouds of candy floss at your age is over the top, if you ask me.
Nobody ever asked you for your opinion, Mum, so I'll thank you to keep it to yourself if you don't mind. We're just going to have a bit of harmless fun, and it's to support cancer research. What's wrong with that?
Nothing is ever harmless fun, Brooke. I wish you would realise that. I need to warn you. You need to be careful today. There are bound to be some dodgy people at the fair floating around.
What are you talking about, Mum? Samantha Bordeaux's fraught lips became unduly pinched. Her eyes widened with an earnestness that Brooke was well acquainted with. She drew in a deep breath and braced herself as she waited for her mother to tell her about the imminent dangers that awaited her at the fair. Brooke was well used to her mother's long drawn-out deliveries of what to watch out for. Indeed, if her mother was a weather reporter, there'd be no sunny days ever left.
These days the world isn't a safe place, love. I wish you would realise that, her mother predictably said. In the good old days, when I was young, things were markedly different to what they are now. I could freely ride my bicycle down the street with the neighbours' kids, and not worry about a pervert hiding out in his car getting ready to kidnap one of us. My mother wouldn't worry about me because it was safe out there. Crime was at an all-time low, but not any more, I'm afraid. There might be pickpocketers at the fair. Such people are opportunists who will take full advantage of a purse that isn't being fiercely guarded. So you must have your wits about you at all times, Brooke.
Oh, Mum, change the record, won't you? You go on and on about how I've got to be careful about this, how I've got to be careful about that. Honestly, you worry so much. Relax, everything's going to be fine. And I am careful, I'll have you know. I mean, I've been brought up by you. So being cautious, well, that goes with the territory of being your daughter. Your influences have actually rubbed off on me, believe it or not.
That's the trouble, Brooke. I don't think my influences have rubbed off on you at all. You are so carefree, and that's your problem. Me and your father worry about you incessantly. You are a lot less responsible than you should be, Brooke. And much as I like your best friends, Fern and Anthea, very much, I'm very sorry to say that those young ladies aren't exactly the most responsible young women I've ever seen. Nor are they the best influence on you. Don't get me wrong, they're lovely people, but they're far too carefree and nonchalant about everything, in my opinion. They both act as if life is an ongoing bowl of cherries, and nothing is ever going to go pear-shaped for them. When I think they're in for a rude awakening, because I'm quite sure trouble is waiting for them around the very next corner. But they fail to see it. They're completely oblivious about how the world works, and how cruel and cold it can actually be. And as a consequence, I think their haphazard, lackadaisical attitudes have rubbed off on you somewhat, and not made you prudent enough. For a start, I think your driving leaves a lot to be desired, Brooke. It scares me out of my wits to see how completely irresponsible you are behind the wheel. You put your foot on that pedal far too hard, love, and it really concerns me. Even your father thinks your driving is a bit on the dodgy side. And if you carry on driving this way without due caution, sooner or later you're going to end up in an accident.
Oh, Mum! Oh, there you go again! How many times have you told me this? Don't be so ridiculous! Brooke rolled her eyes in exasperation. We can't all drive as slowly as you, Mum, or we take forever to get to our destination.
What are you implying, Brooke? Said Samantha Bordeaux indignantly. Are you suggesting that I drive like a snail? I drive responsibly. That's the difference between me and you. You said it, Mum, not me. I'm a cautious driver, Brooke. I know, unlike you, that a vehicle is a deadly weapon, and when you drive irresponsibly, you can easily kill someone, or even yourself. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that. For the people in your generation are blindly ignorant, mistakenly believing that they will live forever. And many people get killed on the road as a consequence. Why? Because they were distracted by their cell phone or something, and didn't realize that they drove straight through a red light into oncoming traffic. That's the difference between me and you, Brooke. I also believe Fern and Anthea are not good drivers. They're almost as bad as you are, but not quite.
Don't be so mean about my friends, Mum.
I'm not being mean, love. I'm telling you the absolute truth. I'm not going to sugarcoat things because they're your friends. I'm going to say it exactly how it is, whether you like it or not. Sometimes it's good to hear the truth. Your father saw Fern driving one day on the road, and he was absolutely appalled by how many times she just overtook people so brazenly when she shouldn't have done so. She took so many unnecessary risks, and she drove erratically. That is asking for trouble. Do you realize how many people take unnecessary risks out there on the road, overtaking when they shouldn't, just like Fern does? And many of them never reach their destination, simply because they weren't cautious enough.
And your point is, Mum, said Brooke, raising a brow. She absolutely abhorred the way her mother rambled on and on about the dreadful things that could potentially happen to people who failed to pay attention. She was half tempted to say, "Change the record again, Mum, because you keep playing the same old miserable, joyless tune." But she wisely kept her lips shut.
I've been thinking about it long and hard, Brooke. And you know what? I've come to the conclusion that you should take one of those advanced driving courses to improve your driving skills. It certainly wouldn't hurt to be more nimble behind the wheel, so your reaction time behind the driver's seat could potentially save you from a life-threatening, very dangerous situation.
I don't want to take an advanced driving course, Mum. I'm a perfectly good driver. I don't drive at your speed because I drive at the speed limit. But I'm a safe driver. I'm not a dangerous driver, and I resent the implications.
Well, think about it long and hard, Brooke. I will pay for your advanced driving lessons. Look on it as a gift from me. And if you think I'm coming down hard on you, it's only because I love you. So for goodness sake, don't take offence.
None taken, Mum, said Brooke, rolling her eyes. Brooke was glad to leave behind her nagging mother, and she arrived at the fair promptly with her two best friends from her childhood, Fern and Anthea. It would seem the loathsome weight of her parents' perennial pessimism lifted off her like a hot air balloon in the wind and floated away to be remembered no more. Her mother's warning words about keeping tabs on her purse at all times and watching out for opportunists were lost in the distraction of all the exciting activities on offer. Brooke was beginning to feel like a kid in a candy shop. She was glad she had come to the fair. It was refreshing not to take life too seriously for once. It was a vibrantly beautiful, beautiful day. The sky was the most perfect cup of blue you've ever seen, while the sun had magnanimously chosen to serenade the day with its generous warmth that was neither too hot nor too cold, so the weather could not have been more idyllic. It was early spring. The cold winter days that had dragged on and on like a long-winded school term that seems to never come to an end were finally behind them. Cheerful yellow daffodils flamboyantly announced the season's prompt arrival, and were happily clustered together in cheery groups, their dainty yellow heads bobbing gracefully in a gentle breeze that did little to diminish the warmth of this gorgeous day. Ostensibly, people had shed their outer clothing, rather like a snake lets go of its tight skin after a burst of growth. The crowd were wearing T-shirts and shorts and baring their white arms in the sun. It was just so lovely on the school playground, where the fair was being hosted. It was so warmly welcoming and inviting, and some of the saucer magnolia trees were bursting with bloom. Brooke was sure that right now she couldn't be in a better place, although doubtlessly her parents would beg to disagree, for they both thought that all childish things should be put behind you, now that you were grown up. But they were wrong about that, as far as Brooke was concerned, because it really was good to let go of your inhibitions. Her mother was a fine example of someone who held on to worry, like a tight overcoat that she refused to shed. But Brooke couldn't help feeling that if her mother were at the fair today, she might actually enjoy herself, if she gave herself half a chance, that is. Fern was the first to notice the large sign outside a red and white striped tent, which read, "Carella Dupreen, world-class gypsy fortune-teller. She can predict your future. We dare you to come in and have your fortune read, if you've got the courage." The latter part of the sign almost seemed like a challenge that Fern and Anthea were eager to take on, but Brooke was not so on board with this idea. One very large woman waddled past the three young ladies, with her equally as chubby 5-year-old daughter, who bore an uncanny resemblance to her, and was tightly clutching her hand. The woman joined the queue to the gypsy tent very eagerly, and cheekily pushed past a couple of people in the line, who gave her glaring looks, but politely said nothing. It would seem the buxom woman pretended she hadn't seen them, and Brooke overheard her saying to another lady, who she seemed to know, who was also standing in the queue, and allowed the buxom woman to slip in front of her. "I knew I would find you here, Gloria," said the over-large woman, in a voice that was bigger than she was, for everybody could hear her, as if she was announcing something on the loudspeaker. "I couldn't believe it when I saw the sign," she said excitedly. The layers of blubber under her chin wobbled as she jiggled with enthusiasm. "Carella Dupreen! She was in Las Vegas, you know, about 10 years ago. Crowds of people were queuing to see her. It was impossible. I didn't even think I'd get a chance to see her. The lions were so big. She's the real deal, you know, the real deal. Her predictions are uncannily accurate. She told me my fortune. Everything she said to me came true. She told me I would marry a man in the building business, in building construction. She saw lots of houses, bricks and mortar. And guess what? I married a building contractor about a year after her reading. I can't believe she's here today. I can't wait to have another reading with her. She can take one look at your palm and knows things about you she can't possibly know. She is incredible." Other people, hearing the large woman's loud confirmations that the gypsy giving readings was legitimate, hurriedly began to scramble in line, so that it began to get longer and longer. Their expressions registered excitement, for if this gypsy was the real deal, they certainly wanted their fortunes told, while others looked hesitantly reluctant and a little on edge,
as if they had reservations and extreme misgivings about having their fortunes read, because just supposing what Corella had to tell them was contrary to what they were hoping to hear. "Did you hear what that woman said?" said Fern, looking excitedly from Anthea to Brooke. "She said that she's heard of Corella Dupreen before. It sounds like the woman is the real deal. She's authentic. The woman claimed to have seen her in Las Vegas over 10 years ago. She claimed everything that Corella Dupreen told her came true. That is so cool, don't you think? And this gypsy is at the fair today, telling people their fortunes. Oh, I can't believe it. I've always wanted my fortune read. I must admit I thought at the fair we would have a make-believe fortune teller, telling us our fortunes just as a joke. But it sounds as if she's legitimate, that she's a real deal. She reads fortunes for a living. She's not charging much for a reading. I've never been to a real fortune teller before. So there's no time like the present. We've got to go and see her." So there we are. That is the end of part 1 of our story. Part 2 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.